All right, we're going to get started in a little bit. Okay, I think I'll get started now. Welcome everyone to our very first virtual garden feast. We're so happy to have so many of you join us today. At our last count, we had over 700 register for this event. That's very special, and we are so thankful for your interest and support. My name is Sarah Ryan, and I am co-chair of today's event with Carla Mckay. We were really excited to have this event in our new celebration garden this year. But obviously, this has become a unique opportunity to have more of you with us than we could have fit even into that large space. So for now, we'll just tease you with our Zoom backgrounds as an idea of how special this space is, and hope we can invite you inside it again very soon. Fortunately, even without the garden and without the feast, we can still offer our impressive and renowned keynote speaker, and we are so pleased and grateful to Adam Greenspan of PWP Landscape Architecture for providing today's special program. Before Carla introduces Adam to you, I want to say a few words of thanks to those who've made this possible. Thank you to our very steadfast event committee, Julie Baldacchi, Anki Gelb, Claire Myers, Jennifer Peterson, and Wendy Tonkin, who are all very special longtime friends of the garden. And I also want to thank our over 30 event donors and table sponsors who have already generously donated to Garden Feast. Many thanks to our board of directors for all that they do to aid and support the garden, especially in this difficult time. I've enjoyed working with my co-chair, Carla Mckay, very much, whose energy, ideas, and bright spirit I have been particularly grateful for. So thank you, Carla. Mostly, I just want to acknowledge and pay tribute to our incredible San Francisco Botanical Garden staff, who have worked tirelessly, creatively, and just resolutely during this time, and always really. This is a difficult time for everyone, but I have been continuously impressed with how optimistic and hardworking this team is. So just want to say thank you guys. We hope to see you again really soon. Anyway, without further ado, I hope you all enjoy our program today. And with that, I'd like to hand things over to my co-chair, Carla Mckay.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a joy working with you too. Hey everyone, Carla Mckay. I'm a new board member, and since this time last year, I have joined the board and enjoyed being the co-chair of this year's event. Although we can't be together in person, I'm super excited that we get to do this virtually. So I am looking forward to seeing all of you next year back in our pretty botanical garden. Hey, as someone who hails from the wine industry, I'm excited to highlight our wine sponsor and introduce you to Suzanne Pfeiffer-Pavitt, founder of Pfeiffer-Pavitt Wine. Suzanne hails from the great state of Georgia and spent her career in the technology industry. She and her husband Shane acquired land up in Calistoga, California, and the rest is wine history. If you're like me, you enjoyed Suzanne's date night, I like to say a Sancerre, like Sauvignon Blanc wine at last year's garden feast. Not to be outdone by the enjoyment that we had sipping her wine last May, Suzanne has graciously donated 2 magnums of her date night wine, which we'll raffle off at the end of the program, so stay till the end. And she's made a special discount offer, which she'll mention, on a case of her wine just for the SF Botanical Garden. Suzanne and her Napa Green certified winery are a perfect match with the San Francisco Botanical Garden's mission. Welcome, Suzanne.
Back with you all this year, albeit virtually. As Carla said, our winery is located at the top of the Napa Valley in the bucolic town, or just outside the bucolic town of Calistoga. We make approximately 2,500 cases of wine, so we're a very small, some might classify it as a boutique winery. And to kind of bring this together as to my involvement, one, besides the fact that I'm an avid lover of the gardens and of the botanical gardens specifically, I grew up in rural Georgia, Northwest Georgia, on a small family farm. And I like to say that land stewardship and recycling were not buzzwords in my growing up. They were actual ways of life. And so it was really ingrained in me to be resourceful and to be a good steward. And so I actually jumped at the chance to build our winery out of recycled and repurposed materials. So I'll give you just a quick highlight, and that I hope when things change, you will all reach out for an appointment to come and visit us. We are by appointment. Our winery is 90% recycled, repurposed materials. We used a 100-year-old redwood to create the board and batten facade that you see on the outside. The walls are all insulated with recycled blue jeans. And even our tasting table that literally hangs from the ceiling is a found piece of 100-year-old redwood, 100-year-old black oak, black walnut that we recycled and found it in a walnut orchard here in local Calistoga. So there are lots and lots of details. We are, as Carla mentioned, a Napa Green certified winery. And what does that mean? In short, that means we do all the right things for Mother Earth that we should. I live here on this property with my husband and my 2 teenage sons. And even though we have about 24 acres, it seems to have gotten really small over the last 9 weeks. We also organically and sustainably farm all of our vineyards. Some highlights that will speak to my gardening friends. We employ a natural pest management. We have beneficial nematodes. We've been releasing ladybugs in the vineyard since our children were young. We have recently added owl boxes. And most importantly, and to start, we didn't plant our vineyards within the canopies of the tree system that was existing. We are very blessed to have a property that only had 3 owners since the 1890s and had been undeveloped. And we really wanted to stay within that framework. So we don't plant within tree canopies, and you all know that means they're not competing for resources, and we certainly didn't remove anything. We worked around the natural topography. A lot of different things we'd love to share with you when you come to see us. Our 2 flagship wines, many of you, I think, enjoyed one or both of those and had a glass or 2 possibly during our garden feast last year. And although I'm saddened that we're not able to enjoy the wine together in the beautiful garden, I know that we will be able to again soon. So I have made available, although we can't be enjoying it right now, you can enjoy it in the privacy of your home or wherever you're choosing to shelter in place. And we have a link for that. You can go to, let me check my notes, sfbg.org/garden feast. And the link is there for you to access the wine. We'll make sure that gets to you. And then also, if you didn't register for the raffle, click on that link. There's no commitment whatsoever. You really just need to give us your information. And after we hear from Adam and the team, we will close up and draw 2 names. One will win this beautiful Magnum, which is 2 bottles for those who don't know. 2 bottles of Sauvignon Blanc in 1 bottle. We make about 12 of these. So we're going to give away one of those. And then we're also going to give away a bottle of the Date Night Cabernet. So enter the raffle and do that. And I'll leave you with my final thought. I have long had a personal mantra for myself, and that was to surround myself with really clever and talented people, and amazing things can happen. And there is no exception to that when it comes to the beautiful and talented Botanical Gardens organization. I have really enjoyed meeting and talking and working with them all. And I know that you all share in that same feeling with me. This is a treasured resource for us here in the Bay Area. They do amazing work in educating and really just enlightening us all to the absolute bounty that Mother Nature can provide when she's given a chance. And so I hope that we will all support them and ensure that this is a treasure for the Bay Area to enjoy for many, many, many years to come. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Sarah. It is a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Stephanie Linder. I am the Executive Director of the San Francisco Botanical Garden. And I am virtually in the Thomas Church Pavilion located within our new Celebration Garden. We were lucky to receive a generous donation to restore this pavilion, and I hope you can all come see it for yourselves soon. It's now my great pleasure to first thank everyone who has already contributed to Garden Feast this year. And again, thanks to our co-chairs, Carla and Sarah, the committee, and the 30+ donors who have already made very generous commitments to the garden through this Garden Feast activity. And now for our main event, I would like to introduce Adam Greenspan, our keynote speaker today. Adam is the directing partner at PWP Landscape Architecture and has been the lead designer on a wide range of projects, including public parks, campuses, mixed-use development, design competitions, and private estates. He became a California certified nursery person in 1996 and has brought his passion for plants to his work at PWP. Adam led the design of the Salesforce Transit Center since the initial design competition in 2007 through its opening. PWP conceived of the park as an integral part of the building and the neighborhood from the start, with a focus on an incredible array of plants that are particularly suited to grow in San Francisco. Salesforce Park is conceived as a compact, accessible, and experientially intense botanical garden in the middle of the densest and hardest part of the city, providing a multifunctional green space. His additional projects include the Glenstone Museum, the Jewel Changi Airport in Singapore, the Colorado Esplanade, the Newport Beach Civic Center and Park, and the Marina Bay Sands Integrated Resort in Singapore. Adam has served on public art selection panels for the City of San Jose and the City of Santa Monica, and served as the president of the Landscape Architecture Foundation. And I just want to add, now that I have told you all about the wonderful things Adam has done, I just want to say personally that I was blown away by the Salesforce garden or park. It's more like a garden to me, and really just delighted that Adam agreed to be our keynote speaker. He also met with our board and toured our board around the the park right before the shelter-in-place order. So we all did get to go and visit with him in person, and it was just a wonderful experience. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Adam.
Thanks, Stephanie, and hello, and glad to be here with everyone. It was an honor to be selected or asked to be the keynote for Garden Feast, and I'm sorry we can't be together tonight in the gardens, but I'm very happy to be here with you today and for us to be able to experience some of San Francisco's public gardens virtually behind us, as well as on the presentation. I think Stephanie's introduction was so good that I might be able to do my presentation a little more quickly than I had anticipated. But I'm excited to be speaking to you on the 150th, anniversary year of Golden Gate Park and the 80th anniversary year of the San Francisco Botanic Gardens. I've been visiting the gardens regularly for over 25 years myself, and the power of nature, the wonder of life, and our connection to each other and nature are all things that I feel more deeply about as a result of spending time there. Though I was always interested in the natural world, I became specifically focused on plants and gardening when my parents told me that I could no longer collect animals and I couldn't have any more pets. I turned to collecting plants and to gardening, and from there I began to focus more and more on the botanical world and how people and animals interact with plants in all capacities. Through experiences at public gardens and in landscapes and communities in many different cultures, I found that plants communicate so much about climate, about taste, about culture, history, and most importantly for me, about time and connection. In the last months during our quarantine, the importance of and the need for large-scale public parks and gardens has become clearer to me and to many others than it was ever before. Here in the Bay Area, we're lucky to always be connected to nature in some way. Because of the topography and the hilly streets, or a view that we get when we go around a corner, or the fog rolling in, or the changing light, and of course the incredible plant and animal life that we have all around us, most of us feel situated within larger landscape systems. Nevertheless, making these kind of intimate experiences with plants and the natural rhythms available to all people in cities is something that has to be a conscious effort that we all champion as a necessity as we move deeper into a more and more complex future. And that's what I, in my work and our office, have been trying to do, which is really create places that stick in your memory and establish shared space and a shared identity. My office has been around for over 3 decades, but over the last 2 decades or a little bit longer, we've been working on projects that are bigger and bigger in scale and more complex. And they've increasingly had a greater focus on living systems. And working with living systems and working with plants, as probably most of the people on this call know, is very difficult. It's not something that you can build and walk away from. The challenge that we give ourselves is to make great civic landscapes and gardens that last through time because they're fitted to their environments and to their culture. And each of these places in this image, are gardens and parks that have existed for decades or centuries because they're taken care of, because people value them, and because people invest in them. So bringing people closer to nature and working hard to make a transit center building have a net positive contribution or give a net positive contribution to a new neighborhood were some of the goals that our design team set out with when we conceived and developed the Salesforce Transit Center Park in downtown San Francisco. Both of these goals, though, took inspiration from the Botanical Gardens and Golden Gate Park. So I thought I would walk through sort of our initial design thinking and then how it's all turned out. And I hope you all are able to go visit Salesforce Park either now when it's actually still open and you can walk around there, or in the future when everyone's able to get out of their house a little more. This is an image of the initial and the original Transbay Transit Center, which was built in the 1930s. And was an active, vibrant center in San Francisco because there was a bigger light rail and public transportation system that was used, including trips across the bay to the East Bay on light rail. But what happened over time was a freeway, the Embarcadero Freeway was erected, and ramps and loops encircled the neighborhood. The neighborhood itself was a neighborhood of parking lots, industrial and manufacturing kind of entities, and sort of in other, industrial uses. In 1989, obviously with the Loma Prieta earthquake, this freeway came down, and the ramps coming down allowed this whole area to be reconceived and redeveloped. And so what you see in the upper right in red is the original loop, is the new Transbay Terminal loop that allows buses to come off the Bay Bridge, go through the terminal, and then back to the Bay Bridge, which then means that all of these blue areas were able to be redeveloped for mixed use of retail, residential, and office uses. San Francisco City Planning planned and proposed that this area, the Transbay redevelopment area, become the densest part of San Francisco with the tallest buildings, but that those buildings, like I said, would be mixed use. So it was going to become a new neighborhood with people living here, but also people working here, and also a destination for people probably on the weekends or in the evenings. And so you can see today, these buildings shown in blue in this aerial photo are all the buildings that have been built since the competition for the transit center was put out, and since we won the competition with Pelly Clark Pelly Architects and a large design team in 2006. In blue are new towers that really create, like I said, the densest part of the city, and one that when you look at it, there's not very much green space, in the neighborhood. When we assessed that and found that to be the case, early on in design, we looked at the site for what was going to be a 4-block long multimodal transit center, and we found that at 5.5 acres in size, it was the size of Union Square, Yerba Buena Gardens, and South Park all put together. And what we thought together with the architects was that if we made something out of the roof, something that was more than just a roof, that the building in its entirety could become more like an organism, and the roof and a park on the roof could become an integral part of cleaning the neighborhood, cleaning the air, sequestering stormwater, but also making a place for people to go that would hopefully become the center of a new neighborhood. And to do that, we took cues, like I said, from Golden Gate Park, because like the transit center site, Golden Gate Park is very long and skinny. Rather than being, a giant square where all of the area is connected to itself, Golden Gate Park runs from the Panhandle at the eastern end all the way to the beach. And as it moves down that sequence, there are different kind of zones and different experiences that people experience when they move through the park. So that idea of having a sequential experience of smaller scaled parks or attractions or recreational kind of spaces was the idea that we brought to the layout of the Salesforce Transit Center, because while it's 5.5 acres in size, it's a long 5.5 acres. So someone, giving a concert or calling out at one end can't be heard or seen by the people at the other end. Some other parks that we looked at and took note and cues from are the smaller parks, Lafayette Park, Alta Plaza, and Alamo Square. All of these parks were built around the same time that the neighborhoods started to be being developed around them, but they weren't completely built around until after the parks were installed and functioning. And so in that way, we saw the potential for the Transit Center Park to become the center of a new neighborhood and someplace that would be like a collection of these smaller parks for people to come down onto and spend time in. We also looked at San Francisco's Victorian history. And that's not only its architecture, which you see on the street, but you also see that in its conservatories. On the upper left is the San Francisco Conservatory of Flowers in Golden Gate Park, which was and is, a great collection of plants that are there on display to learn about the natural world. And that was something that in the Victorian area was very popular, collecting plants. And it's something that I do, today, and like I said, since I was in high school. And when you look around San Francisco, as probably the majority of everyone on this presentation knows, you see some great surprises around corners and in nooks and crannies in other people's gardens that have been there for over a century in some cases, of very exotic and very interesting plants that have thrived here in San Francisco. So what we proposed to do was create with the architects sort of an inside-out conservatory where the Grand Hall, which is the main central space of the Transit Center building, where everyone comes to start their experience of transit, either in trains, high-speed rail in the future below you, or buses 1 or 2 levels up above you. They would be in a space that would have natural light because the light was coming in through a skylight above. And we looked at that skylight as really looking through a conservatory out at a great plant collection from the beginning, because what we wanted to show people that were down on the ground was that there was a 3-dimensional inhabitable park space up above. And so what that was intended to do was to become the base and the centerpiece for this new neighborhood that is mostly made up of, or entirely made up of, high-rise buildings with no green space at the ground level. In order for it to be a hub of the neighborhood, we said it should have a schedule of programming to attract people and to keep it activated, because at that time, in 2006, 2007, people thought that a park 70 feet above the ground was something that would be very hard to make successful and very hard to get people to. The High Line didn't exist, and no one thought of elevated parks as being something that could be an active and functioning part of cities. Today, that's different. Everyone wants a High Line, and it's turned out that people are inhabiting roofs, here in San Francisco, but also all over. But we wanted to give as many people cues that they could come up from as many points as possible. So this is a skylight that is installed today, looking from the bus deck level, 1 level below the park, up at the Ring of Palms above that skylight, and at Salesforce Tower beyond and above that. What this diagram shows are all of the access points from the ground level or from adjacent buildings. In green are ways to get up from streets and sidewalks below, as well as from inside the building. And in yellow are bridges that are coming from adjacent towers that have been built since the park was designed, like Salesforce Tower right here to the north, which is right across from the main plaza in the park. So because of those kind of connections, we focused the main social activity at the center around a plaza and a grove of trees, the Arrival Grove, and the bamboo, the timber bamboo grove that grows up around the light column, then running out to other kinds of activity areas as you move east and west. What we wanted it to feel like was a park or a garden, as Stephanie said. And to do that, we didn't want it to feel like you arrived up on the top of a building on a flat roof with mechanical equipment or other things, popping up. So we used topography and rolling soil to create something that has an expansive feel and feels like you're standing on the ground. Because you're not standing on the ground, it was a very technical buildup that's all about creating a good root space for the plants that we put up there, which is a continuous and connected root zone that varies in its depth, but always has continuous soil for an 18-inch layer, so that the roots of the trees and the plants can interknit between each other and move across large horizontal areas. The park diagrams shown here showed the general layout and feel, with flat areas in the center, which correspond to the zones for active use, like spending time in groups on a hard surface on the plaza or in a picnic meadow. Whereas as we move out, it gets mounded and rolling, and passive experiences through garden spaces or through native meadowlands are what we imagine people would do and what they are doing now. The the diagram on the bottom is an early diagram that shows the park's botanical focus on feature gardens that were specifically designed around plants that should do well in our climate, but not only San Francisco's climate, but what we anticipated the climate to be up on the roof of this building in this very built and hard, part of the city. And some of those are geographically focused, while others are plant type focused, like grasses or the wetland garden or a prehistoric garden. Of course, we have a very long garden that's focused on plants native to California, both Northern California area near where we are, and then moving to other parts of California as you move through that space. This is an image of that was used to conceive the bamboo grove around the light column, and a rendering that was done during that time, ultimately being realized. During the competition and all the way through construction, we worked with the public artist Ned Kahn, who's based in Sebastopol, and works with natural systems and natural phenomena. And he initially proposed that an interactive bus jet fountain that would express itself on the park level would be triggered by buses that run one level beneath the park. So when buses come off of the Bay Bridge, they, he said, would trip a cord like in an old gas station where you drive over a pneumatic pipe and it dings a bell. The buses would drive over a pipe and that would cause these jets to go up. So we ended up working with him to measure out the jets so that each bus triggers about 8 to 10 jets, and the jets move down the park's length at the speed of a bus. So if the bus moves fast, that wave of water moves fast down the park. If the bus moves slowly or stops, the length of the bus measured in jets stays there. And that's one of the dynamic aspects that overlays on the park systems that's not a botanical or horticultural dynamism, but is one that's about the movement of transit below. What we also focused on was the possibility of creating habitat here on the roof, because again, this is the only green space or the biggest green space in the immediate area. And so we focused on flying members of San Francisco's society. And we also thought maybe we would have swimming visitors that we would actually have to bring to the location. Ultimately, we have a lot of plants and a lot of flying visitors as well as walking visitors, but we didn't have any actual water features or ponds with fish in them. This image shows the layout of feature gardens. Some of the images here were taken at the San Francisco Botanic Gardens, others at Huntington Gardens in Pasadena. But overall, these are the plants that have been installed. And what we wanted to do, because this is a very densely populated part of the city, and we were hoping that large numbers of people would come, was we wanted to create a way to communicate as much as we could within limits about the residents and the inhabitants of the park. What we also wanted to communicate was the technology that it took to build the park and some things about our climate or our specific location in the world. And so we came up with this idea of a plant rail, which runs around the length of the park where the specialty gardens are, which really keeps people out of those gardens, because this is a kind of planting that just won't work in a public garden, if people are allowed to come and walk through that and walk on those things. But what that rail also does is became the armature for holding this interpretive signage system, which talks about many different things, like I said, not only the climate or the horticulture, but also some of the technologies that were used in constructing the building. The loop path that runs around the park is about a ½ mile long, so people have been going there and using it recreationally and for exercise. What one of our special gardens is at the far eastern end is a wetland garden. And the wetland garden was designed to be able to receive and treat, polish gray water from the building. So it gets water from the sinks after people wash their hands. that can come up and be polished in this subsurface wetland that exhibits plants that look like wetland plants and are wetland plants, but the water doesn't express itself above the surface of the gravel that you see here. And then that water, after it's polished, can be sent down to be reused in the toilets and urinals in the building. I think from a plant standpoint, it was an incredible opportunity growing up in California to work on a project that had the potential to integrate so many different species. And what you see here in each different color are different species of trees and palms that were specified for the project. But because the design was done in 2008, 2009, this was right after our last recession, and a lot of nurseries in California and around the country had very hard times and actually didn't make it through that period. So finding these trees and finding those species was difficult and sometimes impossible. So what that plan did was it allowed us, me and the contractor, who was McGuire and Hester here in the Bay Area, to go to nurseries throughout California and in a couple of cases in Oregon to look for the species that we were specifying. But if those weren't available and we couldn't find those, this sort of blueprint of multicolors allowed us to look for substitutes. And if a pine, a Cowrie pine, wasn't available to go in the Australian garden, what we had to find wasn't another pine, it was another Australian plant. And that was something that was a hard thing to communicate, but ultimately we achieved that. I think we were able to work with a great team on this and studied many aspects of the design prior to its construction. We knew where the sun was going to come and where we would get shade through the day based on what we knew would be the building's heights around the site. But what we didn't know was how the new buildings they were constructing and that were being built during this time frame would be affecting the climate and would be reflecting the sun, on the tower or from the on the park. Excuse me. So because the sun moves across on the south side of the park, the sun rays hits the south side of the new buildings that were being built north of the park. And so what you see in the right image is the palm garden just after it was installed on top of the park there. Heads of Brahea and Washingtonias peeking out. And what you see on the face of the facade on this white is the silhouette of that same garden being projected onto the facade there. And that's because these palms are reflecting in the glass of a building over here to the right of this image. And that building is projecting those palms back onto the building itself over here. And what that really showed to us is that all of the plants that we're planting here are not just in San Francisco or just on a roof. They're in a very, very unique microclimate that, is not necessarily understandable. And, we need to keep our fingers crossed and try to watch and understand, how the plants react to their situation. And that's what, as gardeners, we all do when we plant a plant in a certain location. Here you can see the buildup of the substructure and then the area where soil was going to come in. You see some lightweight fill, styrofoam fill that's going in to create the mounds, and then soil's coming in on top of that in the future. And this is when the soil had come in, but the ground cover planting was not yet installed. So you can see a hill in the background that will be covered in ground cover and now is, a hill of glass, and this is a hill of grass. And so what this rolling topography really is meant to do is connect the park in its length and feel like you're in, a special park and place, not a roof of a building that's really focused on transportation. So that was the palm garden on the right at installation. This is more recently after installation. And these are a couple of images looking down at the full park since it was built. On opening day, it was filled with people. Many of you might know that it had a great opening day and a good first 6 weeks of its public life, and then it was closed for about 9 months, which was very unfortunate. It was unfortunate because we didn't get to go there, but the thing that actually turned out very good was that the trees and the plants all established themselves and were able to establish themselves during a time of relative quiet. And so when people were allowed back on and it reopened in July of last year, of 2019, many of the trees and shrubs were much more established than we expected them to be when people would first be experiencing them. These are some images that were taken throughout that first period of its opening. In the middle up here, you can see people having, I think it's a Zumba class on the plaza, and this is the glass paving, which also is a skylight from below in the Grand Hall. These images were taken in that plaza in front of Salesforce Tower. And like I said, 6,000 people above this level can come down and walk across the bridge directly onto the park. Various kinds of activities have been programmed there, including salsa classes and salsa get-togethers. This is one where you can see the action both from above on the park on the left and then below in the Grand Hall. And even for the year or the 9 months that no people were coming to the park, there were plenty of other visitors. I went regularly, and there were more hummingbirds, visiting every corner of the park than any other sort of quarter-mile length location that I visit. And because this is a botanical garden keynote, garden feast, I'm putting forth a few images to feast on. These are plants and palms and others, with great structure and silhouette that have been placed behind the glass that is what protects the bus jet fountain water from getting into the planting beds. The fog and wind garden with plants that do well in fog or look like fog and come through the railing. And a bit of interpretation that talks about our location in the world. And then, some plants of different kinds, some of them particularly special to me. A white lapidaria in the Chilean garden is doing, thankfully, very well right now. And plants in the desert garden at the far western end. And others more towards the northeast. These are some images of the Wetland Garden, which I like. And this is the largest palm that we have up there. And it looks like they like it a lot too. So I think, we have something for everyone, whether it's an activity or a plant or a garden. And it's an experience that I'm hoping becomes, a part of San Francisco life if it stays open long enough and we can all go there. And like I said, it is open now. Both my work and the work of the San Francisco Botanic Gardens are aimed at bringing people closer to plants and at allowing people to notice and learn from them and each other. And over the last 25 years, I've seen the San Francisco Botanic Gardens change a lot, probably almost as much as I've seen this site change, over the last 2 years. I've seen small trees and palms turn into giants. I can remember the Andean wax palm when it was this youngster, and today it looks like this. But I've also been comforted by trees and places that somehow look the same over what's now been a long time, in my life. And so working to help design cities and landscapes and working with plants is both humbling and comforting, because we work with systems and forces that are bigger than we are. For me, the fact that trees can live for many human generations and that many generations of people are connected to each other through their continued care and management of gardens and even their care of individual trees is truly profound. The connection to both the past and the future through landscape is why I value the San Francisco Botanic Garden, and I look forward to its next 80 years while I'm here and also after I'm gone. It's my hope that San Francisco, that the Salesforce Transit Center Park joins the gardens as a cornerstone of life and horticulture here in San Francisco. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Adam. That was absolutely fascinating. And if you have not been to the Salesforce Park, it is open. So if you can bike, run, or walk there, go visit. And if you can't, go visit when you can. It's really spectacular. And as someone who gets to work in the Botanical Garden in Golden Gate Park and lives near Golden Gate Park, I'm pretty spoiled by access. But when you're downtown there, it's sort of the only game in town for that kind of experience. And it is such a critical natural resource to have in that part of the city. So thank you for sharing it with us. You know, we have a few questions that have come in. We won't get to them all, but I did want to just ask a couple. Adam, if you can stay with us to respond. And I want to ask this one because I think, and sorry to those of you if we don't get to your question, I'll forward them to Adam. But I think some people don't think about this, so I'm so glad to get this question from Donald, who wants to know who manages and takes care of the gardens. Can you share that with us?
Yes, and that was something that we focused on, early, because as everyone knows, these gardens and landscapes do need to be managed and cared for. And the owner is a public agency, the Transbay Joint Powers of Authority. They're responsible for its management and care, but they've also hired somebody that manages the entire facility. And so Biederman Redevelopment Ventures is the entity that manages Bryant Park in New York and who manages and programs the park here. They then have a series of consultants and gardeners and people to work with related to the specifics on plant care. And some of them might be on the line or watching this, and others, are other professionals around the Bay Area. But we're working with them to hopefully work hard to keep the horticultural aspects of the management of the park, at a high level. And that's one reason why the programming and the use of the park and the use of the facility is also important, as it is with you, to try to keep all of that going, managed, maintained, and also loved by the people who come there.
Great. Thank you, Adam. And, I think I'm going to move us along. We do have a number of questions, which means that you've really, excited people about this topic, and I hope that they will get to visit the parks soon. Before I introduce our next speaker, I am very excited to announce, speaking of closures and reopenings, that we here at the Garden are working to reopen safely in the very near future. I do not have a reopening date for you just yet. There are a lot of new protocols and safety measures that we need to implement. It will likely not be a full opening, meaning that our library and our offices will not be open, but our outdoor spaces will be reopened safely just as soon as we are able to do that in accordance with the public health orders. So stay tuned. If you're on our email list or you follow us on Facebook, we will make sure you know when we are reopening, and we are counting down the days to welcome you back. We're also very excited to be able to hire back many of the staff who we did have to lay off when we closed the Garden on St. Patrick's Day. So we're eagerly planning for and waiting your return to visit the Garden. Now I'd like to introduce Del Maxwell. Del is chair of the board of the Garden. She has volunteered in our plant nursery for more than 20 years. She's a master gardener and has her own award-winning garden. And she's just an incredibly dedicated leader here. I know I speak for the staff, the board, and the volunteers when I say how lucky we feel to have Del on our team. And now I'll hand it over to Del.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, Adam, for your wonderful presentation. I've visited the Salesforce Transit Center and Park multiple times, and each visit is just as delightful as the last. There's a wonderful balance between the size of the space and the continuing change of experience. Around every curve is something new to look at, with plantings that emphasize key points in horticulture and design, be it a floristic province or a grouping of plants that creates a beautiful combination of color and form. It's obviously a place that's been warmly embraced by the community, both human and avian. It's a real urban oasis. As is the San Francisco Botanical Garden. We're a refuge for plants, people, birds, butterflies, and many other living things. We're a place of respite and a safe haven. It's where we connect with plants and marvel at the beauty of our natural world. It's where we meet with friends and colleagues to share in our mutual love of plants and nature. It's where we work to protect biodiversity. This experience with the pandemic and resulting loss of access to the garden has been devastating to our communal well-being. We all long to return and experience the healing aspect of being in nature. And it's been devastating to the garden and our financial ability to continue the operations and programs we all love. We've been hit very, very hard. Garden Feast has been our major fundraising event over the years. It's been a beloved event, one where we can share in a delicious meal, pick up amazing, unique plants, hear from distinguished speakers and city leaders, and participate in an auction to support our children's programs. I'm really happy to say that many of our supporters who sponsored tables and who were major contributors have followed through on their commitments, even though the traditional event is not happening. I'm so grateful for your generosity. Thank you. My personal commitment was to a table for $25,000 this year. I'm adding another $25,000 to this commitment in hopes that we can use this as a match to raise an additional $50,000 for the garden. Everyone who has joined in this meeting obviously cares about the garden. Whatever your ability, I urge you to join in the effort to support the garden, whether it's a contribution to the matching gift, a membership, or offering to volunteer. I welcome all of you to join in whatever capacity is best for you. Please visit sfbg.org/gardenfeast for more information. And now let's turn back to Suzanne to see who our prize winners are.
All right. So to be completely objective, I've asked my team to draw the names for us. And our first winner is Ms. Anne Ritchie out of Palo Alto. She will be receiving the Pfeiffer Pavitt Date Night Sauvignon Blanc Magnum. So we will reach out to you, Miss Anne. And the next one will be Mr. Holden Hardcastle in San Francisco. And we will make sure that you receive the Pfeiffer Pavitt Date Night Cabernet Sauvignon. So congratulations, you guys.
Thank you, Suzanne, and congratulations to our winners. Again, if you would like to contribute today and have your gift up to $50,000 matched dollar for dollar by Del Maxwell and her husband, Pat Hanrahan, please go to sfbg.org/garden feast. Help us reopen as quickly as possible and stay tuned for a reopening date. We can't wait to see you back at the garden. Take good care of yourselves, take good care of each other, get outside, wear your face covering, wash your hands, but get outside 6 feet apart, but get outside as often as you can. And we look forward to seeing you back at the garden very soon. Thank you.